Good morning, everyone. I will call to order the October 17th meeting of the Milton Budget Coordination Committee. I see we have Maggie and Nathan on the screen. Good morning. So we have a pretty packed agenda today, and we are going to try to time box some of these items. Good morning, Winston. We're gonna time box some of these items so we can get through them. And I know we want to kick it off with the financial forecast, so Nick and the town staff will take 25 minutes. We're trying something here, so bear with us, but Nick and the staff will try to take around like 25 to 30 minutes to walk us through the 5-year forecast.
All right, Jack.
Good morning, thank you. So I had provided both a broader workbook that has much greater detail, and then I had a shorter workbook, a one-pager that had kind of a summary, line-by-line summary with some notes in it that provided more context overall. Just to introduce kind of what the assumptions are, I'm actually gonna just show some of the information that we shared with the school committee finance committee this week as kind of a high-level overview as a way to introduce it. And first, we already talked about kind of how our fiscal 25 ended at a previous meeting. We had discussed that again with the finance committee, the school committee this week, but the one new update we wanted to provide is that free cash was certified last week at $4.58 million. So because of the positive year-end results and the rest of the calculation for the Department of Revenue that they conduct, free cash is now officially certified at $4.58 million. The first appropriation out of that is scheduled to take place at the special town meeting on Monday the 27th, which is a $60,000 appropriation to fund the special election on November 4th. Hopefully that'll be cheaper than that, but that is the money we're setting aside for that. So I just wanted to provide that quick update as a lead. In terms of the forecast.
You guys travel safe.
I'm sorry, I don't know if he realized he was on.
It does.
In terms of the financial forecast on the revenue side, the way it's been set up is as follows. Property tax increases, we assume we would tax to the max that we're able to under Proposition 2.5, which is a 2.5% increase on the overall tax levy. For new growth right now, the last 3 years, we've been well over $1 million in new growth. We have plugged that for the succeeding 5 years. This is a place where we might have to reevaluate that depending on how some of the macroeconomic stuff affects Milton and Massachusetts going forward. For fiscal year 26, our new growth estimate was $1 million. We are going to be well over that. The Department of Revenue has already reviewed our new growth numbers. The Board of Assessors will be discussing them on Monday. So we'll have, once it's official, we'll have well over where we were last year in new growth, which was about 1.29 last year, and we've exceeded that this year. For state aid,
last year, this year.
Sorry, fiscal, it's a little bit tricky. So we budget going into the town meeting, and the new growth is set when we set the tax rate in the fall for the current fiscal year. So last year's new growth I'm referring to is for fiscal 25 was about 1.29 million. This year for fiscal 26 will be in excess of that. And the assessors.
Fiscal 26, we're only 3 months into fiscal 26.
New growth lags. New growth is the prior year's growth is captured on this year's taxes.
How could I get that wrong?
Okay. Yeah. So we capture any and all projects up until June 30th.
So the
prior year.
The FY25 new growth is what happened in FY24.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So all of the growth that's happening now will feed into fiscal 27. State aid, the way we budgeted that, again, trying to be conservative here, on Chapter 70 education aid, we treated it at $132,000 increase a year, which is $30 in additional aid per student out of approximately 4,400 students. It's just a conservative placeholder that we plugged in. we will reevaluate that for fiscal 27 specifically once the governor's budget is released. Unrestricted general government aid, that is another state aid account we've plugged in for the forecast of 2% increase per year. That's been below where it has been lately. That translates to about $82,000. Obviously, with potential impacts to the state budget, this is something we'll have to watch for 27 and beyond, but that's how we've approached it for the forecast. Our local receipts, which is, we talked a little bit more.
I'm sorry, does one of those have a minimum? Like it can't go below 30 per pupil or something, or am I making that up?
The way, chapter 70 is generally, the state will hold all districts harmless and you won't ever have less than you had the year before, but it doesn't have to go up every year.
Okay.
And in dire economic straits, that might be different, but that is generally the case.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
No, yeah,
So is this in the materials that you sent?
correct.
Okay.
And there's more details and there's like a one-page revenue financial forecast summary chart that has a little bit more notes and covers this. This is just like a easier way to present it, I think. For local receipts, so that's motor vehicle excise, building permit fees, interest income, everything that we collect locally. We've plugged that, trash fees are in that. We've plugged just a 1% increase based on our fiscal 26 forecast. So again, overall, I would view the revenue forecasting as pretty conservative. Maybe some tweaks in terms of how we treat new growth, and then we'll have to monitor where state aid will be. The forecast also doesn't assume any use of free cash in any year going forward. For fiscal 27 specifically, this gets us to about $4.2 million, or a 3% increase in expected revenue from 26 to 27. And that tracks kind of roughly in each year succeeding. So that's on the revenue side. The one thing I didn't flag in here is just how the operating budget stabilization fund would interact into the forecast. The workbook I've shared talks about that and shows that in more detail, but that's a separate revenue source that we haven't, I didn't spell out specifically here. But the baseline is ultimately at the end of the day, most of our revenue accounts are pretty consistent year over year. And I don't want to say they're easy to forecast, but they're generally pretty, we just keep it pretty low in terms of where that money is coming from.
Stay on that for a second, just a few questions. So the 2.9% increase in revenue is 2.5% from property taxes, and the other 400 basis points are from those other things on the list?
Correct.
Okay. Chapter 70 and unrestricted UGGAs in the approved budget for this year? Where are those figures from?
For this year,
Approved state budget?
yeah, those, I think,
That's
General-
usually January, right?
yeah, so that was set in the state budget. I think the per pupil aid was about $135 per student. So in fiscal 26, it was much higher than that. And then for unrestricted general government aid, I think it was like 1.7%, and the prior year was like 5%. So does that answer your question?
Not exactly.
Okay.
So the $132,000 increase, was that in the budget that the governor signed?
Oh, and that is just a forecast because they have not released any information yet. So this is just looking at 27, what we've baked an increase in, and we view it as a pretty conservative forecast. So it's not based on anything. In January, the governor released her fiscal 27 budget, and that's when we'll have the first take on what will that actually look like.
Okay, got it.
And then we won't know the final till,
Hopefully June,
July.
Yeah.
July, August, depending on when they do their work.
yeah, it's tough to make these assumptions this year. Don't envy you.
Do you think we underestimate? Well, it seems like on some, if you look at the estimate for 26, we underestimate some of the revenues based on history.
Correct.
And I wonder if we should be a little bit more, try to, not so conservative.
it's a delicate balance. And I don't disagree. I think one thing that we've tried to do is, in the wake of the COVID slowdown, cities and towns across the state drastically cut some of their revenue forecasts, and we're very slow to bring them back up. That is one thing we've done, is try to reset our forecasts so that they're conservative but a bit more accurate. But again, looking at where the high revenue came in, really the two that we can adjust is new growth in terms of forecasting and the local receipts. Everything else is pretty much baked in. And on the local receipts, here are some of the higher accounts, and a lot of this truly is one-time stuff. Building permits, for example, we had 3 or 4 40Bs all permitted last year with substantial building permit payments. We're not gonna have that again in 28. We're not gonna have it in 29 necessarily. Interest income, we've really increased that forecast, but we're still estimating like $400,000 in interest income.
Yeah, there's like a million less than.
Correct. However, there was 1 year in fiscal 19, I think, the interest income was $50,000. So like there can be wide variations. And if we increase these too much and we're starting to pay recurring operations based on higher revenue forecasts on local receipts, if that revenue goes away, they can't support those increased budgets. So it's a good question. I think a lot, penalties and interest again, the treasurer or the collector, wearing our collector hat, has been trying to close out some longstanding issues. So we're seeing more tax liens redeemed, penalties, interest being paid.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily gonna recur.
Well, that one stood out to me, and because it's like $1 million difference, and I know it will be less next year than this year. I completely believe that, but I don't think it would be as much less. And maybe the other one that I looked at, and it's not a lot, but it's something, but the recycling fees, trash stuff.
Trash fees we'll look at, that fiscal 25 was the first year of the new increase.
Yeah.
So we weren't quite sure how that would actually play out. If we increase the fee, do people change their behaviors a little bit? So it's one we'll keep an eye on now that the $4 per week fee is a little more settled. I don't know if Joanna has anything else in terms of the revenue side you wanted to add beyond that.
No, I agree with being cautious about increasing our projections related to a couple of these line items. I mean, I think the one that stood out to you was the penalties and interest. Is that what you're talking about here? Or
The trash and recycling fees.
Yeah, but before that you said the tax lien.
Investment income.
Investment income. So that is really dependent upon changes in market value.
Yeah.
I do my best to kind of capitalize on rates and using our cash as best as possible to the town's benefit. But if the interest rates dip, kind of
And they
more.
will.
Exactly, and I don't think it's to Nick's point, I just don't think that to the extent that we start using that money, depending on that money to pay recurring operational expenses with an offset in the budget, that it would be prudent to kind of manage like that moving forward. I think we can talk about whether 400 this year, 400,000 is the right number, moving forward and how to increase that and how to project, but it's a bit of a moving target, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
When you're budgeting, we have no idea about.
It just seems like a big dip. I think
It's
it will
huge
go down,
difference, yeah.
but it just seems like a
Yep.
big one.
Yeah.
compared to the last
But
couple of
you're
years.
also raising a budgeting philosophy question, which is as we estimate, I think we always want to be surprised to the upside, not to the downside.
Right.
I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
So,
Especially in a volatile environment that we're in right now.
right,
Jay's got his hand raised.
Yeah, that gets to something I was gonna ask, and if it's too far off topic for now, we can table it, but we've had free cash, which is a positive surprise of multiple millions of dollars for the past several years. And in the free cash policy, it's proposed that we aim for a free cash of 2 to 4%. So that's aiming for a good surprise of 2 to 4% every year. If that's what we want, that's what we want. But I guess that's the question is, are we aiming to have a positive surprise of 2 to 4% every year? If so, then we want to be underestimating our revenues. If that's what we, but let's decide, is that what we want or is that not what we want?
Well, yeah.
Who decides that?
I think we should always be conservative, but I think if we can be as accurate as possible, we should. Everything you do, if you can like tighten it and get it better, is it better for the town budget?
Yeah.
Less surprises, you should try to do that. That's what I'd be.
I just wanna, point out that 4.6 sounds like a ton of money, but as a percentage of our overall budget, it really isn't that big. And if you swing one, it's great to swing the positive way, but there are communities that swing the negative way, and I just would caution, like, I'm a big fan of being conservative, because I would hate for us to be faced with something like that, because a lot more goes into the calculation than revenues in excess of budget and expenditures less than appropriation. There's other things that fall into that calculation that could swing it to a lower number. So I just,
The superintendent has,
I
Something
would
to
always
say?
support all this dialogue by saying, you'll know if we're being too conservative, that after a period of fiscal years goes by and your free cash is so high that you've been too conservative, right, which would be a good news story, but then that's when you could start to moderate a little bit. But until that time, if we're hitting the key points
yeah, we don't,
of a certain structure,
yeah,
then it seems to be a good practice to be conservative, keeping a positive balance so we can look back on what we
Yeah.
need to do and how we can allocate those resources. But 2% of your budget or 1% can go south in a real quick year. So I appreciate the conservative viewpoint and structure to this budget for sure.
Mr. Daly.
Yes, I agree with everyone said, but I think for us to really adjust these up, we need a longer track record. If we were here for 2 or 3 years, maybe 4, I say then we can move it, but as of right now, I don't think it's a good enough reason to say the reason we're moving the budget is that we did this last year. Because we are still in, to use yours, Megan, a really volatile time after the pandemic and changes in interest rates and sort of settling where we're gonna settle economically nationally before we can even think we're gonna hit this number again and even consistently. So we may just be in a space where for the next 2 to 3 years, it's best if we're surprised a little bit with the under budget.
can I just make one more point? And also, like, if you look at the 5-year forecast, we go into a deficit pretty quickly. And if we remain conservative in our revenue estimates, that will, and say we're conservative and they come in higher, that's only gonna help us in the out years. So. just wanted to mention.
So that's on the revenue side, how the forecast is pretty structured. On the expense side, just to outline how we've mapped out the forecast and what is baked in. So this is showing 27, but this carries forward for each year in the forecast itself. Salaries for all departments are projected to increase 2.5% a year. General expenses 3% a year. Health insurance 7%, and I'll come back to that. General insurance is our liability insurance. That's a little bit higher at 8%. State assessments across the board at 2%. Debt services in accordance with our debt schedule, which we're just refreshing now. So I'm a little vague there, but you can look into how right now for the debt service schedule, it's expected to increase by $500,000 in 27, another $500,000 in 28 before stabilizing a bit. So that's already baked into the forecast. For OPEB and retirement, they pretty much go hand in hand. We have a policy that says that $2.5 million a year, increasing 2.5%, is reserved and set aside for our long-term liabilities, whether that's OPEB or retirement. You know, if retirement system needs additional funding over its normal cost, that $2.5 million is there for the retirement system. If it doesn't, that money is there for OPEB. Currently on the funding schedule, the Milton retirement system for the next 2 years is is the funding schedule is its normal cost for expected future benefits of current employees, plus $1 million over above that to keep building up a reserve. The OPEB appropriation therefore is $1.5 million for the next 2 years, because it's the $2.5 million set aside for it, minus the $1 million additional going to Milton retirement, if that makes sense. And that's already baked into the forecast over the next several years, and it assumes that trend will continue. I carved out utilities specifically, although it's budgeted within general expenses, just to speak a little bit more about where that is heading right now with a lot of national attention on utility costs. We've extended our supply contract for electricity for an additional 3 years. Right now, we're paying 13.7 cents a kilowatt hour. Under the new contract, that will extend from December of 26 to December of 29. That'll drop to 13 cents a kilowatt hour. So despite what has been a lot of news and attention paid on electricity costs for our supply, we're locked in long-term, and we'll see a decrease in savings, a decrease in costs. However, that's only a portion of the bill. Eversource's costs for distribution are expected to also increase. So on the one hand, we're seeing some savings. On the other hand, we should expect utility costs, our electricity, at least stay flat, if not slightly increase. And then gas supply, our gas contract is up in next November. Right now, based on the market, our plan is to not extend that contract just because the pricing is not favorable at this time. However, the forecast for next winter is that costs should remain somewhat flat, although again, the supply is only half the bill. Delivery charges are expected to grow 5 to 7%. So it's a little bit more detail on utilities, but I just wanted to flag that as an item of interest. On health insurance, I've talked about this both with the Select Board Finance Committee as well as with the school committee. We're seeing a lot of pressure on the health insurance front. Our premium increase last year was 14%. The Mass Municipal Association held a forum a couple of weeks ago where the overall takeaway in the room was last year's premium increases are what you should expect this year. So while our forecasts had planned a 7% per year increase, which is well above what our recent history has been, the market fluctuations are significant enough that fiscal 27 will be tough on health insurance. There are things that the town can do to mitigate some of those costs by doing plan design changes potentially through different mechanisms under the law that would shift costs from the town to the employees and maybe reduce that premium increase. None of those measures have been taken or really planned yet at all, but I just wanted to flag the health insurance piece is kind of the biggest cost pressure we're seeing for fiscal 27 at this time, and that would extend into future years depending on when and if this trend finally slows down.
So at what point, right, like I know, like again, there's a lot of volatility in this. We're definitely beyond our 25 minutes. At what point, so the assumption is 7%, you know, we saw 14%, we're probably gonna see something around that again this year, maybe more. At what point does the forecast adjust the percentage assumption? And I know that's probably what you're trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, I think so it's been helpful. MMA event, we had the managers meeting for Norfolk County Wednesday, and we went around the room and everybody talked about where they're seeing their costs, and it's the ranges. People are plugging 12 to 20% increases in health insurance as kind of their first marker on the budget. So I think we're about ready to up that forecast.
Have you seen this? Like, when's the last time we've seen this?
I think the last run up in healthcare costs like this was prior to the health reform measures that were taking place back in like 2010, 2011. Since then, it's not been, it's been high,
steady.
but it's not been like outlier years like this.
Two things. One is different than we talked about with revenues. So I agree. History before you make a conservative increase in revenue. the opposite is true for expenses, where you have real life experience last year and you read the room, so to speak. So health insurers are losing money. Blue Cross Blue Shield and Point 32 have both reported hundreds of thousands of losses. And the likelihood is that, so what does that mean? That means they're gonna raise premiums. And if we had 12% increase last year, is that right?
14.
Oh, 14. Then I don't know how we could come away with an estimate that says our costs are gonna be 7%. I don't know how we could even justify that. So this is an area where I think we should certainly increase that. And similarly on utilities, Eversource's proposed fee increases are so high that the governor's trying to see if she can figure out a way to rein those in. So even if, as you say, we see some savings, the distribution charges, I don't come away with the conclusion that the outcome will be flat. I come away with the conclusion that the electricity costs we're going to see probably a 3, 4, 5% increase there. So again, I would suggest we take a look at that.
I should have introduced this a little bit differently in terms of the overarching piece. So I should clarify in terms of what the forecast today is set up to show. So the way we structure this forecast with these numbers on the expense side is we went first through the revenue. We said, what are our revenue forecasts? Plus, what is our assumption if we use down the operating budget stabilization fund over the next 4 years? If we do that, what can we afford? And that's what this slide is showing. So if health insurance is not 7% and it's 14%, that means all of these other numbers need to go down. So that is how the forecast is set up. The forecast is not set up first from an expense saying what our anticipated expense is and what is our deficit gonna be. We set it up on the flip side saying, if our revenues are X, what does our expense need to be at or below to stay kind of balanced until 2031. So that is the structure today, and I think there's probably worth saying, is that the right approach? But that is the way it's set up today. I should have introduced that at the outset just to, what we're saying is your salaries need to be at or below 2.5%. Your general expenses need to be at or below 3% because of our revenue limitations. Another way to approach it would be like, what are our anticipated costs and what does that mean for a gap? But I agree with your point. It was just the reason we had flipped it around a little bit different.
And if the assumption is that we're over a 4-year period, we're using 25% of our reserve each year, then I would argue that's not a balanced budget. You're doing deficit spending.
And that we don't disagree, but that was the kind of intentionality behind the operating budget stabilization fund is we're going to do this to support the budget over the next 4 to 5 years. When we discussed with the select board, the warrant committee and town meeting.
Well, we should talk more about that. Yeah. I thought that particularly because it requires, I think, a 2/3 vote of select board and school committees, right? Or is it a majority vote?
Different fund.
Oh, okay. I thought we were talking about the operating budget stabilization.
That requires a 2/3 vote of the town meeting.
Oh, okay.
The SPED reserve one that's the vote of the school committee and select board.
Okay.
So, and that has $0 in it today. The operating budget stabilization fund is $2.7 million in it now.
Same point, that if we're spending 25% of that each year, then we don't have a balanced budget.
That may be a different topic for a different day. I disagree, because I think that's the entire point of that budget. It's to get us through. What we've done in the past is we've had an override and then we've cut expenses and laid off people and closed the library for 4 years. And then when we can't cut anymore, we have another override. And the point of this is we have that cushion. We spend a little bit in the first year, a little more in the second year, a lot in the fourth year, and then we have an override without cutting services every year. It's probably a conversation for a different day, but I think that's the whole point.
It is.
And I'll just note of that $700,000 is recurring. So there is an element of that that is recurring every year. So at the very least, 700 grand plus 2.5% is trickling back in, and that would be kind of the baseline of truly recurring money from that.
This is part of the.
So if in year one, we
Part of the tax.
put 700 into that fund and take out less than 700,
Makes it a little
every year.
transparent. I think I like that tool. I think it's a great tool for the town to have. And I think it makes it very transparent that if you're operating as X and you're continuing to use this operating stabilization, there is some worry there that but that's what the tool's for. And I think it's a really nice way to be able to fluctuate the support you need to give to the operating budget each year with a reoccurring funding mechanism within it. It just shows everything right on the front, so you can look at it and really assess what we're being able to do with the operating money in general, without the tool or with the tool. So it's a nice idea. I think it's helpful.
Can I just talk about health, back to that again? I don't actually think it's probably wrong to be 7 or 8% next year, but the increase that we had, I know we were like 7% and then it bumped up 14%. But wasn't that, I think it was mostly due to headcount. And you can't really look at health insurance without looking at the headcount. This changes with that, how many people are on it.
That it was a component of why our health insurance budget went up last year, but the health insurance budget year over year, I think the increase was closer to like 18 to 20% increase year over year, of which the premium was a 14% increase. So the other reason that cost jump was because headcount was higher, and we had experienced a much higher enrollment in the lead up through 23, 24, and into 25. Right now, our budget assumes stable headcount. So that is, it's assuming a stable headcount, assuming not a lot of departments, if any, would be adding any new FTEs, and the changes would be if people who are already employees are shifting onto the plan or off the plan. So right now, this is assuming a 7% budget increase overall. We're not expecting much of a significant change on enrollment, but it's something we need to keep an eye on. I agree.
So
Wait, can I have a question? Sorry, ask a question.
Hey Maggie, yep.
Just two things. One, I'm wondering who decides on the policy change for the health insurance on all the employees? Like, who decides what the contribution from the employee side will be? And then that's one comment. The other comment is I think I'd be a little bit more conservative and not depend on an override every 4 years. I don't think that's sustainable for long time residents in the town, especially commercial properties. Our commercial properties go up at a faster rate than a residential property. So I wouldn't assume that if an override will happen every 4 years. Thanks.
On the health insurance piece, the premium increase is set by the town on a year-by-year basis. The share in which the town right now pays 76% of the plan cost, the employees pay 24%. That is a mandatory subject of collective bargaining, so the town can't unilaterally change that. Plan design is also a subject of collective bargaining, but there's legislation that was approved in 2011 that allows a town or a city to make plan design changes through a form of negotiations, but allows the town to make those changes if it shares up to 25% of the savings in the first year with the employees. So on plan design, the town has a little bit of control over that. In terms of the share of the premium costs, that is set and only can be changed on the collective bargaining. And then the premium increase is a yearly amount set by the town.
And then how often do you go to collective bargaining? How often can you go back and negotiate that?
On the premium split, we could always ask. I don't think the other parties would be necessarily that interested in having more cost shifted to them, but there wouldn't be anything prohibiting the town from trying to negotiate over it.
who decides, Milton pays if they work 20 hours a week, right? Who decides that? Is that part of collective bargaining, or is that? If somebody works 20 hours a week, they get health insurance?
That's a state law,
That's a state law?
yeah, for any employer.
For a town or any
For any
employer?
employer, if once you trip over the 20, is it, whether 19 and a half or
I don't
20
think
hours per
so. I
week?
think it's 30.
Mm-mm. No, it's
More than half-time.
more than half time you're eligible for health insurance.
Really?
We're at 8:10.
That's the forecast, so.
Okay, I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
I'm good.
Just look. Okay, this is helpful. I don't know if we have any other questions or follow-up coming from this, but I think that was a helpful background on how that model's put together.
I wanna thank Nick and Amy came in and provided this update at our finance subcommittee this week, so thank you very much for doing so. It was really helpful as well, so thank you.
All right, so I don't know what we have next on the agenda. We have 20 minutes left. I know there was Amy, were you guys gonna do budget to actual for FY '26?
Any questions, we're happy to take them. We
Yeah,
provided the
Probably,
report.
yeah.
It's
I know you said
somewhat
it was-
early in the
yeah,
year.
it's-
I don't see anything that's concerning
Okay.
at this point.
Okay. Sounds good.
The only point I'll make, and just because it was tying to the health insurance, is that we're below our budget enrollment for health insurance today in terms of overall headcount. The challenge that we're seeing, and we'll have to watch throughout the year as well as into next year, is that at open enrollment from June to July, we had a substantial increase in change over from individual plans to family plans. So those are $15,000 more expensive for the town on an annual basis. And a larger number of employees are on our family plans than we had anticipated. We budget a reserve within the budget for these kinds of changes year over year, but headcount has been steady and on target. The plan enrollment is slightly different than had been anticipated, and since it's such a large budget item we we're just talking about, I just wanted to flag that for '26 in terms of something we're watching throughout the year.
Is that due to new families or is it due to spouses changing plans?
We have young employees, we have a young workforce, and I think you're seeing families growing.
We're seeing a lot of maternity, paternity leaves over the last couple of years and projecting into next year.
Just skipping around a little bit. Nick, did you feel like you had covered the FY '27 budget? I know we had like some time on the.
Yeah, that's kind of where things stand. We have departmental requests are due back at the end of the month. And where that process is well underway at this point.
So we also had policies on the agenda. Policies that we've been working on.
My thought was we were going to distribute drafts to committee members.
Yes, and they were in the meeting materials folder I set up and sent around
Great.
Wednesday evening. So they're there, folks can take a look at, any questions, let us know.
Right, so that's great. So anyone who has comments should send them back to Nick. CC, Megan, Winston, and myself.
Megan Winston and you, okay.
But so to your point, and I took a look at the deck that you had for last week.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so the policies are taking a look at, some of the various reserve accounts. Nick, I don't know if you wanna speak to it a little bit, like what we're, just as a high level for folks to take a peek at,
Sure.
maybe open up the packet.
Some of the key points were referenced earlier, but they set targets for the general stabilization fund, the capital stabilization fund. Set slightly more guardrails on the use of free cash. Speak to how the operating budget stabilization fund can be withdrawn over the next several years. And then capital planning and debt management set like targets as to what our overall investment in capital should be. So they all kind of tie together. and Jay reached out this week as well with trying to come up, I think, more specific rules around the use of free cash. So a lot of towns also have a free cash policy. I had kind of baked it within the reserves policy, but a free cash policy would say, rather than just say it shouldn't be used for recurring operating budgets, which is what our policy basically states. It says this is how it will be used. So it's another way to approach it that would be complementary potentially to the rest of the reserves policies. So that's kind of on a high level as to what they set out as targets.
Yeah.
No.
Oh,
Hey, Nathan.
Hey, everyone. Nick, just a clarifying question on the policies. It wasn't clear to me, are these, I'm seeing these three policies, are these brand new, or are they revisions of existing policies, or are they sort of like new versions of something else that existed previously? I just wasn't sure what the history was on these.
They are new.
New to Milton.
Yeah, they track, so the policies track with kind of what has been our general attempts, but never really kind of written down anywhere specifically. The policy framework themselves and the templates that you see, those are the Department of Revenue's policies that they use when they go into a city or town and help write a policy packet. So we've stolen, or I should say we've plagiarized from the Department of Revenue, their format, their phrasings, and then the kind of the town by town decisions are the goals and the more specific policy parameters, but the overall framework comes from the Department of Revenue.
And I should say that initially I thought we needed work groups on the policies, but when I learned about all the research that Nick had done in preparation, I decided that's no longer necessary. So if anyone has comments, as I said, I'll send them back to Nick and CC myself, Winston, and Megan, but no need for a work group on any of those.
This is good stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm excited that we're taking steps to advance this because it's a pretty important and standard practice that, you know, I know the city of Boston has many reserve accounts and such that, you know, are maintained. You know, and going back to the forecast conversation and the use of free cash and the need to be conservative in the revenue forecasts. I mean, having a more disciplined approach to building up reserves is gonna help further insulate the town from any shocks. So.
I think it speaks to Winston's comment at the last meeting that no matter who's here, those policies stand.
Right.
And it provides longevity of guidance that's in good practice. I think that's all pointing in the right direction.
Just for clarity on where we are and feedback on this, myself, Megan, Amy, Joanna, we've already looked at these and had our input in, so it's to the rest of the group now. Take a look and come back with feedback.
Just high level, I think got a meeting with Mr. Milano about this next week, but I think at a high level, I'd like to see more structure and more direction. As you said, you know, if we all disappear tomorrow,
Right.
I would like to see more structure and more direction in these. Now, people say you shouldn't have too much structure. You shouldn't have a policy that says you shall spend this and you shall fund that. Totally agree. But a little bit more structure, that somebody reading it could sort of anticipate, oh, here's how much we have, here's how much will be spent. Yeah, I get it. At the moment, it seems that a lot is left up to every year budget, say, oh, what do we need? I'd like to see it more on the structure side. And that's something that may take a year for us to come up with. It's not gonna happen in 2 weeks, but that's where I'd like us to work with this.
And I think that's worth the discussion.
And I also think that's part of the reason that you wanna have like many eyes on this, right? Because no single one of us is gonna have all the answers or anticipate all the possible needs or outcomes associated with it. So everybody paying attention to this right now is very important. And thank you to our town staff for putting it together and encouraging us to do it. Sorry, oh, Nathan.
Sorry, thank you. One more just process question, or maybe two things. I think just, I heard Winston make a comment about who's reviewed this. Are we clear so it sounds like you're seeking input from this group on these
Yes.
policies. And then are we clear on what then happens next and how these policies get finalized? Who does that? I just want to make sure we all have the same expectations there. And then I haven't read the policies. I probably agree with Jay that I'm sure we'll find ways to bring more specificity and structure. I hope it doesn't take us a year to finalize these policies. I think that would be unfortunate. But I do think we should, it would probably be worth also, and again, I haven't read the policy, so this might not make any sense once I read it, but I think whatever we are attempting to do in the policies, it would be useful to probably model that out with historical data and see, okay, if we had applied these policies over the last X years, what would have happened? That would probably give us a little bit of a reality check on how applicable they are to our actual situation.
Can I real quick?
Yeah.
Maybe I was being a pessimist when I said a year, but what I was really thinking is it's best to have a policy before you set your annual budget. Otherwise, your policy is sort of, you're making it fit the budget you set up. And I think there's about a 0% chance we'll get these policies set before we make the next year's budget. So I'm hoping that we get these policies set up before we make the following year's budget.
FY28.
Yeah.
And in terms of who would be a signatory to the policy, just to pick up that piece, right now they're proposed to be approved by the select board and warrant committee. It could be just the select board, it could be select board, warrant committee, and school committee. The more buy-in across the boards and committees and getting to a consensus across all three, I think would be the best outcome. But I think that's a
But
question for how the committees.
the minimum is the select board has to sign off
It's a
on it.
starting point, right?
Yeah.
And we need to be careful about approved. So with regard to approval, the select board approves the policies for the town. Other parts of the town might endorse the policies. They might have reviewed the policies. They might have commented on the policies, but except for those policies that apply directly to the schools, where the school committee has statutory authority to approve policies, and the select board approves the policies for the town. Warrant committee doesn't, school committee doesn't, select board does.
I agree. It would be great to have all three say we agree and we will
Absolutely.
abide by. I guess my point was.
I couldn't agree more, but I just want to be clear about
Right.
the use of the word approval.
And I think also we're talking about different steps in these policies. This first piece we're asking for comments on is really frameworks, definitions, what we intend for each fund to have in terms of percentages. And I think Jay's point about usage, how we utilize free cash, what we do going forward is a longer conversation. And those may become amendments and additions to these policies. But I think there are steps that we can put in place once we have feedback and agreement, and then there are other pieces that we can add on as we try to refine and get even more sharp and technical in how we use each fund, especially as we're talking about, we've created funds over the last year or two that we intend to spend down, and some that we need to have intentions on and how we review them the next few years. So I don't think it'll take a year for us to put this first piece in, but maybe a longer time for some of these amendments and the intentionalities.
Work groups.
Yeah.
What
You
else?
want to talk about work groups?
Just briefly.
Yep.
So I said that my thinking on work groups had evolved, so I don't think we need work groups for the policies for the reasons previously stated. I do think we need a work group for the financial projection financial
Yeah.
forecast. So
Agreed.
my thought would be anyone who's interested, hopefully that's at a minimum Jay, Winston, Amy, John, or Katie. But anyone who's interested will send out a communication that says when the work group will meet. But the idea would be to actually continue the discussion we started here, drill down a little bit more, test some of the assumptions, make sure we've got all the assumptions there that we should have. So just kind of a continuation of the discussion we had today, but a little more of a drill down, so that ultimately we come away with a, as I've said a couple of times, a financial forecast that is publicly accessible and that helps us educate the general public about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and hopefully my dream would be that they would be so bought in that when we propose an override, the majority of the people say, yes, we get it, we knew about it, and we're all on board. That would be the idea.
So the planner in me. Really loves the idea. I'd be interested to get people's thoughts on this, of running the forecast through 3 plausible future scenarios. Like if the group, I don't know if the work group would wanna do this, but if there were,
Do you wanna come to the work?
I
group?
might, I mean, but I also don't wanna derail what the group is working on, but for me, like, I think it's very interesting to contemplate, you know, three potential scenarios with the most likely risk factors
It's a great idea.
integrated.
Come to the work group.
Okay, great, yeah,
Thanks.
sorry, you got me excited, Leroy.
That's a great idea.
But that might be something to help contextualize and illustrate for folks,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay, sounds like we're gonna keep having fun.
I'd like to throw my name in the hat.
Okay. Noted,
My
all
name in the
set.
hat for the ring.
Next meetings,
Well, I think we have a meeting in 2 weeks, right?
did we schedule that already?
It's the monthly, this is
Oh,
the,
Well, yeah.
this is the in-between meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
This
Okay.
was the catch-up meeting.
Okay.
So that date is,
It's 2 weeks from today,
It's Halloween morning.
Halloween.
Sorry.
Halloween themed budget meeting.
It's not a holiday or anything, guys, it's just, you know, the kids dress up, that's all it is.
It's a Friday this year, it might be more than just that.
Nick was gonna dress up
Halloween
this year.
morning, I didn't know that was a thing.
It's not November 1st morning, so
Right.
it should be fine. Agreed, yeah.
It's Halloween morning, I'll be like candy shopping.
I know, it's like a lot of pressure
Gotta have
that
your
morning.
Animals up, this is.
I've been out of touch, I guess.
Speaking of costumes.
There might be a costume parade at school.
True. True.
Busy than you think, Leroy.
I guess.
Okay, well, I think this was a great discussion, and I think we have our next steps, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. Do we have a motion to,
Motion to adjourn.
all in favor? Aye,
Aye.
you guys have it, all right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks.